Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
And if you haven't listened to us before, we produce 5 podcasts a week. I was going to say a podcast, but about 5 podcasts a week, talking about football, talking about Fantasy Premier League. And it appears that very soon we'll actually have a podcast talking about football and Fantasy Premier League.
Yeah, we'll soon be able to ditch these throwback podcasts. Sorry, 1 second. Wife, can you come and get your son, please? I'm in the middle of a recording.
Oh, hang on a minute. I've got it gone off. Okay.
Someone wants his moment of fame. I know he got all of 2 or 3 minutes in the Champman stream yesterday before he went to bed.
There we go, sweetie. Back in the room.
As usual, professional as ever. I didn't hear a lot of what you said, Suj. Sorry.
So he got his 2 minutes of fame last night before he went to bed in the Champman stream. What's the kid doing? He's trying.
As usual, he's had a very positive. Every time he comes in and says goodnight, everything goes tits up for Arsenal, as it did again last night, remarkably.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be doing throwbacks for much longer, Suj.
No, the rumour is that football will be restarting in all of 2 weeks now. Exciting.
Yeah, 20 days possibly, actually. June 17th is the rumour date.
Can I be honest with you, James? I am worried that official FPL will not be able to fix the game in time. Because we are now talking about, we're talking about 3 weeks, right? Literally 3 weeks today. And you want to give players a week ramp up to be able to fiddle with it. You don't want to be pissing about with the game until 2 days before football reopens, which gives them 2 weeks to do whatever they need to do technically, reopen the game for us all. And this is not me having a dig. I understand it's a very complicated game with 7-8 million players and all the data and technology that goes behind it. But I am worried, based on historical issues around fixing technical stuff, that they're not going to be able to get the game live in 2 weeks. I don't know.
We'll all be playing Sky then. Sky will definitely get their act together. I'm absolutely certain.
I mean, with 50 grand on the table, they've got to get their act together. So,
well, they do and they don't. That's the prize. But it didn't cost anyone to enter that game, right? So
no, that's true.
They'll do what they can. But yeah, I think they'll get it sorted in some way, even if it's brand new mini game or something. Be interesting to see how invested people are to FPL. I think.
Very interesting.
It's going the way it will go. Particularly for the end of the season, we're going to see loads of people re-engaging again on Twitter, or is it going to wait for the next season? It'd be really interesting we don't know, right, how it's going to pan out from that perspective. I suggest everybody will be straight back on it through desperation.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. So interesting to see. But let's do today's pod, which is a Throwback Thursday special. Looking back at the 1999-2000 season for Manchester United, which was a bit of a bizarre season in that obviously they didn't play in the FA Cup, but also smashed the league, got 18 points at the end of it. Yeah,
we was going to focus on a little bit, obviously following we did United's treble winning season last year and kind of debated out was it the best achievement ever of an English side, and were they better than the City side of 18, the Arsenal side of 04, the Liverpool side of now. What's interesting to kind of follow and finish the stories is what happened next. Now, United obviously continued to dominate in the Premier League in 2000 and by 2001 very, very comfortably before Arsenal then made a serious comeback over the following 3 or 4 years. But basically, the season for United and their defence of the treble got turned upside down before the end of June. And on June 30th, Sir Alex Ferguson recently knighted United chairman Martin Edwards and FA interim executive David Davis held a press conference to announce that Manchester United would not be participating in the FA Cup. And it went mental. Everybody lost their shit about the fact that was going to happen. And the reason it came about was through pressure from the FA and particularly the government, based on this new World Club Championship format, which was going to be an 8-team tournament. It had previously been held as one match games. United had just won or would go on and win rather in the late autumn, the Intercontinental Cup, which is kind of the two tournaments have merged to beat Palmeiras in Japan with a goal from Roy Keane to win that competition. This was going to be an 18 tournament. It was the beginning of an expansion of this, a little bit closer to what we now see, which is this 17 format, which is normally played in December, which is a knockout. And essentially the UEFA qualifiers only play a semi-final and then a final.
Or third place playoff.
You are there and back in a week. This format was 2 groups of 4, play each other once, a little bit like a World Cup format. And the 2 group winners would play each other in the final, and the 2 runners-up would play each other in the third, fourth place playoff. United really didn't want to go, is generally the gist of it. This competition had no historical significance going backwards. So to say to the average United fan, you're going to play in this tournament that's got no historical significance, or you're going to try and retain the treble. I mean, straight away, they couldn't retain the treble, right? So there was...
and I completely agree with you. If you look at Martin Edwards in the press conference, when he said that, I think his exact words were, "We understand the significance of being the first team ever to be able to win this World Club Championships," which is ironic because that tournament, that format never happened again. So you'd be the only team to win the World Club. He was trying to make out that they gave a shit about being the first team to win it. His face and his body language did not say that they gave a shit about being the first team to ever win it.
No, what happened was, and what had been happening the previous season, if you go back to even sort of 97, we saw that massive fixture backlog that, say, Middlesbrough had. It was becoming an increasing problem, even though the Premier League had reduced from 22 teams to 20 teams in 1995. Off the back of this, there was serious discussions to reduce the Premier League from 20 teams to 18 teams. There was no talk at this stage of cancelling FA Cup replays or the like, for example. Champions League was about to be bloated by 2 group stages this season.
Yep.
It did look like a mess, a far longer period for United to retain the Champions League than it would have been the previous season, for example. So, but they were under mass pressure from particularly the government to go and represent England in Brazil in this tournament. And the reason for that being England were bidding for the 2006 World Cup. It was believed it was going to go to either England or Germany at the time. As we would later find out, England were miles away and were never going to win it. It was in Germany's pocket long before. But the FA didn't know that at the time, or certainly weren't letting on. And it was seen that if the English representative didn't go to this tournament, then it would seriously damage England's chance of winning the World Cup. Alex Ferguson even spoke in that press conference, saying that he was desperate, even as a Scotsman, for England to get that tournament. And he couldn't bear the idea of the criticism that went United's way from everybody in the public if it would be a deciding factor in England not getting awarded that tournament in 2006. So United felt pressured to go. The alarming thing in hindsight, looking back on it, is there wasn't really the necessity to pull out of the FA Cup with the way it worked out from there. It's worth saying they went out of the League Cup quite early. But to just give you an idea, what they didn't know at this time, the FA basically offered United the opportunity to pull out of the FA Cup, which United accepted because they couldn't see with this extended Champions League group stage, which was now going to mean essentially an extra 6 games to win that tournament. Plus your lack of possible FA Cup replays, etc. This tournament in Brazil, which was going to be another 4 games, factoring the travelling, that game against Palmeiras in Japan as well. Suddenly they were potentially, if everything went as well as it had done the previous season, looking at a season that was going to be in excess of like 75 games, which is monstrous, right?
Yep.
So the feeling was something had to give. The FA Cup, I don't think needed to. And it is easy to say in hindsight with how easy they won the league and going out the League Cup early and going out in the quarterfinals of the Champions League to Real Madrid. But to sum it up, what they didn't know at that time, I don't think it was announced, the FA Cup third round got brought forward to December. The only time it's happened, the third round was played on the weekend of the 11th and 12th of December. And obviously, it's normally always first weekend of January, basically. So to bring it forward to the third round, the fourth round would have taken place when United were away in Brazil. But actually, Chelsea, for example, didn't play their fourth round tie till United were back from Brazil.
Right.
So it could have worked. In the quarterfinals were played in the FA Cup in mid-February.
Mm-hmm.
The semi-finals in April weren't even played on the same weekend. The semis between Bolton, Villa and Chelsea Newcastle were actually played on separate weekends and were both at Wembley. So there must have been a way around the schedule that this could have worked. I don't know if there could have been scope to say to United's opponents beforehand that United are going to have to pay one-off ties. I don't know if that would have damaged the integrity of the competition. But obviously the great feeling was, Peter Ridsdale, the Leeds chairman at the time, said, like, whoever wins this competition is going to, a little bit, you could say like Liverpool now, it's going to have an asterisk against it because the biggest club in the world didn't enter it.
Yep.
But I don't think we remember that. I think if you think about that Chelsea-Villa final, what we remember is that it was a shit final. We don't remember that it was the final when Manchester United didn't enter the competition. What's also remarkable about the fact that Villa got to the final was that United would have played Villa in the third round. And Villa obviously went on to the final. Right? So Villa ended up playing Darlington. It got to basically the first round, and they still didn't know what they were going to do, if they were going to try and work a way for United to get back in this competition was part of the problem. And what they ended up deciding was that one of the teams who lost in the second round was going to be a lucky loser, and from all those teams would be drawn to go back into the competition. So Darlington lost 3-1 at Gillingham in round 2. I think Gillingham got a really shit third round tie, and Darlington got rewarded with a trip to Villa Park in round 3, and obviously got beat again. And Villa would go on to the final. I don't know if Villa had beat Chelsea in that final, would people have then remembered it differently about the lucky loser thing with Darlington and Man United not being part of that tournament?
I don't know. I honestly think that I thought less of it than perhaps other football fans at the time. Was literally, it was a one-off. I didn't really care if Manchester United were in it or weren't. As the fan of a mid-table club with less financial influence and not one of the big four or the big six, there is a certain feeling that there's a certain set of rules for the bigger clubs and different rules for the rest. That's something that exists for not just this kind of thing, but anything and everything else. I suppose it was just, it's different rules for the big clubs, sod the rest of us. I never ever felt that it was something to bleed into something bigger of the big clubs missing more domestic football. It didn't feel, it really did feel at the time like a potential just one-off.
I'm not so sure about that. I mean,
I know a lot of other people would disagree, but
on a personal feeling, my first thoughts were, well, Spurs have got a better chance of winning the FA Cup this year. I didn't give a shit if someone's going to put an asterisk next to it. No one's put an asterisk next to that trophy for Chelsea, have they?
No.
I mean, we were out before United even went to Brazil because we got murdered by Newcastle United. But no, I think there was a great fear that it was the beginning of something, the beginning of a breakaway if United were being pushed into this. And obviously, if you weren't following the headline of government have pushed United into this, the feeling was the average Joe fan was, remember, internet was very new at this stage and stuff, right? Was that United were more interested in going to Brazil and having a holiday rather than defending their FA Cup title. And did it mean in the future that clubs like United, Arsenal, Liverpool were going to begin to look at this whole Super League idea in Europe, which was starting to get mentioned? And I think
still 20 years later, we're still
having the same conversations, and it's no closer, really. So it obviously, thankfully, didn't come about, and hopefully never will. United's actual tournament in Brazil itself was a complete and utter disaster. I think United had the hump with going. Felt like they had been pushed into it. Let's not pretend they played rested sides or anything like that. It didn't until the final group game when they were already out. But I think the FA really wanted United to be part of go and meet local kids and all that. And I think in between the 2 and the 3rd game, they met some kids on the beach and that. But otherwise, United basically locked themselves in a hotel, didn't have any open training sessions, locked themselves away. It was train, play, get out of there, basically. There was no interaction with the local community or the people of Brazil or any kind of media publicity towards the tournament or the local economy or anything. think very much of, when Ferguson gets a bee in his bonnet, like with the whole, I'm not doing interviews for Match of the Day anymore. Yeah, that he kind of had that feeling about it, like, we're here, but we don't want to be here. And we're going to kind of, without saying it, we're going to let you know we don't really want to be out here. But the flip of it was, yes, there was the opportunity to be the first winners of this new competition. Which
Beckham certainly did his best to get himself sent home as quickly.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Bex was definitely looking for an early flight back. 'Cause in their first game, they played Mexican side Necaxa, who were the representatives of CONCACAF, who had qualified for him winning that 1999 tournament. And in the first game, they went behind. I can't remember if Beckham got sent off first or they were already 1-0 down. But Beckham's red card, if you've never seen it, you need to go and hunt for that. It's as bad a red card as you could possibly wish to see.
I tried to find it on YouTube and I haven't.
Can you not find it?
Successful yet? No,
it's so bad.
Over the top 2-footed challenge?
No, it's one of them where he's taken a block. It's kind of like a block challenge, but he sticks his foot out like dead end straight. At like hip height, and he knows what he's doing.
It's like a stab with the.
He knows what he knows. He's going to catch this fella. It's not one of them where he's put his leg out away from the ball. He's gone towards the player. He knows it's horrendous, and he had that guilty look on his face, the same way as he did against Simeone in 1998. But this time he knew at least he'd got sent off for a reason. He went properly. United laboured against weak opposition. They're not even, I know they were obviously the representatives, but not even one of the biggest clubs in Mexico, really. Dwight Ewart scored a late equaliser, which meant they had to really beat Vasco da Gama, who had qualified as the champions of the Copa Libertadores in 1998. They had to beat them, and with obviously a local side playing in the Maracanã. And United got torn. Badly, really badly. One of the things I've read in hindsight was, and this is as excuses goes well, if you look at those two United games against Necaxa and Vasco, they're basically starting daylight and finishing nighttime.
Right, okay.
And one of the great excuses is that United lost a toss on both of those games, which meant their eyes were into the low sun in the first half. And obviously in the second half, it was played in darkness. Well, this low sun certainly didn't help Gary Neville in the first half because he was at fault for Vasco's first 2 goals. The first one, he plays a blind back pass, which Edmundo gets onto and plays a sideward pass for Romario to have a tap in. And then not long afterwards, Gary Neville tries to chest back a long ball over the top and Romario's coming in behind him, gets around Mark Bosnich, scores 2-0. They're in big trouble. The third goal from Edmundo, if you've never seen, is one of the great goals. Certainly the best goal ever scored in this competition, I should think. When he has Silvestre, who joined United following the Champions League triumph. He has Silvestre in his back. The ball comes into him. And if you remember the Bergkamp goal against Newcastle, where he kind of touches it round, but this one, he spins it off the outside of his foot round Silvestre's right-hand side, runs round his left-hand side. There's so much spin on the ball. He just about gets there ahead of Bosnich and prods it in, and United are 3-0 down. It's not even half-time. They're getting torn. They lost 3-1. And obviously at that stage, it's finished.
Home time.
They're done. Interestingly, for the nostalgists, Edmundo and Romario obviously were part of the Brazil 94 squad. They didn't like each other. Very openly hated each other, but they certainly could play together. Very good. Romario had obviously previously haunted United when he played for Barcelona as well, tore them apart in a 4-0 win in the mid-90s in the Nou Camp. So, yeah, it ended as quickly as it started. Quinton Fortune scored twice in a 2-0 win against South Melbourne in the final group game. That didn't matter.
Fortune.
But the whole competition really was farcical and doomed to fail from the start, in the sense that the 2 groups were played in one stadium. So all the games in one group were played in Maracanã, and all the games in the other group, which was Real Madrid's group, who had qualified as intercontinental cup winners from '98, the trophy that United would win against Palmeiras as the previous world champions, if you will. They played all their games in Sao Paulo, and what it meant was even the final group games were played in the same stadium, so they weren't played at the same time. So, for example, Corinthians in Real Madrid's group knew that they needed to beat Al Nassr by 2 goals in their final group game to make the final.
Yep.
Corinthians would then play Vasco in the final. So now you've got a World Club Championship, which is being played in Brazil by 2 Brazilian teams. It's shit. It goes to penalties. Corinthians win it on penalties. And you look back at it and go, and the problem with these tournaments, they're all well and good in theory, these 18 tournaments. And I think that's why there's some talk now about 24 or 32 teams in odd years in the future, a proper club World Cup, if you will, and it's the same. You've seen the tournament that Liverpool have just been in. There's 3 teams who can win it, really. You've got the South American team, the European team, and you might get a very good, say, Mexican side or a very good Japanese side or something that might have a stab every now and again. But really, it's going to be...
Not really.
It's going to be the European or the South American team wins it.
Correct.
And what it always used to be, going back many years, it used to be European winners against South American winners. And that's that. And it might as well just be that now. Let's be very honest.
They wanted to...
It's got to be inclusive and stuff.
Yeah, I did see talk that they wanted to make this tournament, expand it out from the original 8 teams to a 16-team tournament at some point. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, FIFA, especially, obviously, it's their tournament, are looking for bigger ways to monetize things, and making the tournaments bigger would be their thing. But it would be less of an issue had it not been in the middle of the season. The game against Palmeiras for Manchester United, for example, that was that August?
No, November time.
November time.
It obviously had Super Cup against Lazio, would have been in August. It would have played in Monaco, yeah.
So, just get these kind of tournaments done and dusted as part of the pre-season, in much the way we have the Charity Shield, for example. But when you whack them into the middle of the season and they're in a different continent, let alone different country, it makes it all the more awkward. And then you start getting into like 8s and 12s and 16 teams. It's a mess.
I think this will happen, by the way. This Club World Cup idea.
I think summer Club World Cup.
It will be a summer tournament, yeah. I think you'll either get it as like a pre-season thing, a little bit now where you've got kind of the International Champions Cup, but that is very friendly orientated. I think this is either something that would have legs to start in perhaps mid-July before a domestic season restarted, or more likely in sort of a similar time frame to what the current World and European Championships are played in. I think it's got some legs, and I think it will happen because the demand will be there. At least if it's a tournament of 32 teams, South Melbourne, with respect, if they rock up, then fine. It's no different to New Zealand qualifying, and who knows, there might be a romantic story in it at that.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, thinking about the qualification, like from the major leagues in Europe, the issue with a tournament like this is that you'll get a lot of repetitiveness, although you don't always get that in things like the Champions League, where up-and-coming clubs do get a run at it sometimes, like your Shakhtar Donetsk or the Zenit sometimes have had a bit of a run. But like as a West Ham fan, I'd be like, okay, well, we've got this World Club Championship. 4 clubs are going from England every time it runs. It's going to go to the Champions League, for example. It's like we're never going to get a chance to qualify for it. Whereas with the World Cup, you do get a change around in the minnows that do qualify for the tournament. So it would be nice to not just make it an elitist tournament, but have other clubs but other clubs in there as well, giving it a stab and having a bash. That's what adds to the drama of the tournaments as well.
I think it's a 32-team tournament is something that could work, even if you had it similar to, what are Europe getting in World Cups of 13 teams, I think. And then realistically, it's only really Brazil or Argentina, if they've got a good side, that are probably going to push Europe at the moment in terms of winning. It would be a really big deal. It would be incredible if an African or an Asian side or USA or someone like that actually went and won the tournament. So realistically, you're looking at, we do it at the start of most World Cups. We go, there's probably 7 or 8 teams can win it. And if there's a couple of particularly strong ones, I think we sat it last summer and before Russia, and I said to you, I think there's only 4 teams can win it. I didn't see Croatia get into a final, for example, and I certainly wouldn't have counted England amongst that, for example, as well. So
there's always one Eastern European team, like Bulgaria's done well in the past, or Croatia. Czech Republic have had a good team in the past, but not consistency. it's always a tournament, and then they could just as easily not qualify for the next one. You need like an entire generation to come through together, you feel, in those countries for them to have a chance in the tournament like that.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see how they decide if it was 13 European teams, how they would decide who that 13 were, for example. Where would you start? Would you go quarterfinalists of the Champions League? Would you go previous winners? I bet it would become a historical thing. AC Milan would be there knocking on the door, wouldn't they? Yeah, we're seventh in Serie A, but we've won more European Cups than most teams.
But one of the things we talk about so often is the FA Cup not having a European spot associated to it, or how can we make it a little bit more interesting for people? Like, I would definitely say, okay, if you've got the top 4 from the Premier League, the FA Cup winners definitely go into this World Club. It suddenly adds a little spice to the FA Cup all of a sudden.
Just get Wigan Athletic knocking about in the
Why not,
World
though?
Club
You know,
Cup.
once in a while these things happen, so it would be fun to see. I think I would do that.
Well, you know, my opinion, which is not an opinion that many people agree with, is that I believe that the FA Cup winners should get the 4th spot rather than 4th in the league. And it should only go to 4th spot if one of the top 3 have won the FA Cup.
FA Cup.
That would be my opinion. I just think that I can't have the idea that finishing 4th in the league should be a better achievement than winning the FA Cup. And people always say to me, "Oh, you can't have like Wigan in Europe." Well,
yes, you can.
What are you frightened of? If they've earned it, yeah, it's going back to that whole elitism thing. Are we not just going back to that, knowing that Wigan can't really finish top 4 in the Premier League, but they could on a miracle day beat Manchester City in a cup final?
If you'd have said Europa League, I'd be with you all the way, like the 5th place spot or whatever, 6th place spot. But top 4, maybe. What you don't want is someone just to go into the Champions League and get completely embarrassed, whereas I don't think that would happen necessarily in the Europa League. But the Champions League, a side like Wigan, for example, after they'd won the FA Cup, they could have got embarrassed. And you don't really want to see that. So if you'd have said FA Cup winners go straight into Europa League, I'm all over that. Champions League, I need to be convinced that it was a good idea, I think.
With teams like Middlesbrough, we spoke about it on the quiz yesterday about giving anything away, but then they scraped into, admittedly, it was the UEFA Cup, and then got to the final. Right? So, and had some amazing games along the way at the Riverside. What's interesting to go back to United, and obviously coming back from Brazil, was obviously a complete and utter disaster. Couldn't deal with the heat, the change of climate, even from things like when they played Palmeiras, it was freezing cold in Japan. Come back to the Premier League, it's obviously cold. Then they go to Brazil, it's roasting. It's like 32 degrees at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's Brazil's summer at that point. Come back to winter again. And obviously United didn't play in the Premier League for 4 weeks, right? When they went away, they were actually a point behind Leeds in the title race. Remember, United are going to go on and win this by 18 points. They were a point behind with a game in hand. The problem was Leeds particularly and the chasing pack fell over themselves. So United's last game was on 28th December. They drew 2-2 at Sunderland. Leeds lost 2-0 at Highbury at the same time, which kind of brought Arsenal back into the race. But then they fell over each other. So on New Year's Day, Leeds lost 2-1 at home to a very ordinary Aston Villa. Gareth Southgate scored twice. Chelsea then played 3 times before anybody played again, which included a draw at Coventry and a draw at Bradford. Then when everyone else was back playing their 4th game, so they beat Spurs, then they drew at home to Leicester. So they missed a huge opportunity to make up serious points. Leeds struggled. They beat Sunderland the day before United came back and drew with Arsenal. But then United importantly beat Middlesbrough 1-0 with a late Beckham goal. They beat Sheff Wednesday at Hillsborough with a goal with 20 minutes to go from Teddy Sheringham. And then when United were back playing every weekend with everybody else, they beat Coventry. Arsenal lost at Bradford. Leeds got well beat at Liverpool. And so from going in that position where 6 weeks earlier, they'd been behind, they'd missed a month and were already top and clear.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, they beat Leeds at Ellen Road with an Andy Cole goal, which completely sealed the deal. And they went on to, I think they won the final 12 or 11 United. They pissed it from there.
Can't argue with that. 18-point title victory was probably one of the biggest winning margins in a long time.
It was only City's the other year, 19 points beat it. That was the previous record was from that season. And so you can look at that on reflection and go, perhaps the pulling out of the FA Cup was justified. But then could they have afforded to have some treble game weeks at the end and lost a few Premier League games? I suspect definitely
Probably.
so. But you don't know that when you make that decision prior to a season. And I suspect there was a massive fear on the United side in terms of what Arsenal had shown in the previous 18 months beforehand to show they could be a real competitor. And obviously, Leeds would step on this year. Liverpool were improving. So I think there was a fear.
Interesting throwback to that season that a lot of our fans will remember. So I will be fascinated with the United fans jumping in the comments and telling us what they think or how they felt about that as well at the time.
Yeah,
sure.
we won't be getting 18 World Club Championships in Brazil ever again. And I certainly don't think the government will ever be asking a team to pull out the FA Cup and go again. But I do think a World Club Cup in a summer with 24 or 32 teams has some legs, and I think that's something I can accept rather than this Super League bollocks and all that. If that's what's going to keep some of these clubs happy, I don't mind that.
You know, think
interesting. How much interest would you have? Say for you as a West Ham fan,
I'd be very interested.
Would you, as a site? What I mean is, you wouldn't have a team to support, and
Yeah,
the chances are that very often my team wouldn't be in it as well.
Yeah, but we go into the European Championships, World Cups with England, and let's be honest, we haven't won that for 50 years. So are we even going into that with the hope of a team that we can support? I can get behind England, but I don't ever feel like we're going to win anything.
Still your team to support.
Yeah, this would be... If this happened, I think I'd get more excited about this potentially than the World Cup.
Really? Can't see that.
If you, and I also think with some players, if you said to Messi, we're creating this 32-team World Club Cup, let's call it, would you rather win that with Barca or the World Cup with Argentina? I mean, he's a bit in a funny situation where he's won everything else that exists. So maybe
I think he'd take the World Cup with Argentina, by the way. Mate.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of players that have more loyalty to their club than country. I think. I
mean, that's a whole other podcast.
I really do.
Does anybody have more loyalty to their club than their country? I don't think so, mate.
I think there are quite a few.
Handful of players. I don't see that. You got people who are bitter about what's happened with their country. People like Ozil, and you could argue that's very justified, for example. But I think most people know the affinities with their country before they... I'm not talking as fans. I'm talking as players.
Yeah, I'm talking as players as well. I think, like, if you think about a Harry Kane, for example, would he rather win something with Spurs or win something with England? I think he'd rather win something with Spurs.
I'm not sure, actually. I think that's... imagine if Harry Kane's the England captain, they win the World Cup. I don't know. You'd have to ask Harry that question. Harry Kane's a different one, right? Because he's come through the system at Tottenham. It's still the only club he's played for, etc. But if you ask, I don't know, would Sonny rather win the Champions League with Spurs or the World Cup with South Korea? What's he going to tell you?
Yeah, I am talking about these players that have been with clubs for a long time and are iconic there. A Cristiano Ronaldo at Real Madrid would be very different to a Cristiano Ronaldo at Italy now, that kind of thing at Juve. So, yeah, it would require some thought. But I think the players would be really up for it. I think it would be one of those where you'd see some incredible matches, this kind of tournament, because they would really, really go for it. You'd see some great skill.
I think people might be disappointed. Depends where it's played with the heat.
Yeah, true. Let's not get into tournaments and where they get hosted and who wins FIFA votes for now, shall we?
England 2034. I'm there.
There we go. James, do you want to tell everybody what we've got left this week?
We don't really know because we're waiting on a Premier League announcement, possibly,
That's
which is
true.
going to
Things could really get messed up.
Change everything. But I'll be streaming around about 1:00 on Friday on YouTube. Join in, ask me anything, and I'll be streaming for Champman again Saturday, and then schedule next week. I don't know yet, mate. Depends.
We'll be finding out very soon what's happening when we get.
But there'll be podcasts for sure.
That we can guarantee for sure. If you have enjoyed all of the content, then do make sure you download our app, which is available on both iTunes and on the Google Play Store. It's just a simple home for all the Planet FPL content. If you want to support our content, you can go to patreon.com/Planet FPL, which is where you can support us and chuck a few quid into the pot. There's lots of information on the Patreon page about how and why we're setting up Patreon. And last but not least, please do stay safe. Look, ciao for now.
Be nice to each other, everybody. Cue music, man, child.